Welcome to the Anime Audiophile Podcast. Please like and subscribe for more. Thank you. Demon Slayer. Signs from the Wind. Chapter 4. A Promise for Tomorrow. For those who have already manifested the mark, it's too late. Those on whom it appears, without exception, will invariably. The clear yet ephemeral voice passed through him without meaning, as though she were speaking a foreign language. 25. Without exception, those with the mark died by that age. His own older brother had passed when he was 11. The emergency meeting of the hashira came to an end after a vigorous discussion of the training sessions needed for the battle to come. It was crucial to review every move without repeating a lesson and wasting time. Muchiro made his way out of Obuyashiki Mansion. He was wandering through the picturesque rock garden when he heard a voice from behind. "Do you have a minute?" Without turning around, he knew who the low, quiet voice belonged to. "Oh, hello, Himejima." The stone hashira, Jyomiya Himejima, narrowed his sightless eyes. "I wanted to talk to you." "To me?" Himejima nodded. "If you don't mind, let's go somewhere we can sit and talk." Muchiro followed Himejima out to the gazebo. Built in one corner of the garden for relaxation, it emitted a refreshing breeze, and the thatched roof had a pleasant scent. As Muchiro settled into a seat, he could hear the calls of songbirds mixed with the rustle of the wind in the trees. "So what's this about?" he asked the older demon slayer. Himejima got to the point. "What Lady Amain said at the meeting." "Oh." Muchiro had guessed as much. "No point in beating about the bush." "You mean the mark? About only living to 25? "Yes. You know, I was in an extreme state when the mark appeared on me." Muchiro tossed his head. "It's probably not even a true mark." Much remained unknown about the Demon Slayer mark. Some believed it was a kind of concentration of the bearer's life force. If that were true, those with the mark died young because they used up their lives more quickly than other people. But that power allowed a demon slayer to hold his or her own even against upper-rank demons. Muchiro had been able to beat the upper-rank 5 demon precisely because of the mark. "What about you, Himejima?" he said. He heard that Himejima was 27. If he bore the mark, he'd already passed the oldest recorded lifespan. Was that even possible? "Don't worry about me," Himejima sounded unusually on edge. "I've always been ready for death." "But you're only 14. Muchiro flinched at the sadness on Himejima's face and in his voice. The blind giant was arguably the most powerful fighter in the Demon Slayer Corps, with a massive physique, the envy of other men, shielding the steadfast heart of a bodhisattva. And here he was worrying about Muchiro. "Takito," said Himejima hesitantly, "I don't mean to cast doubt on you as a hashira or question your readiness. But, are you all right?" Muchiro was taken aback. "Why do you ask?" He hadn't meant to sound sarcastic, but Himejima's brow furrowed. "The mark appeared on you in your battle with the upper-rank demon. Your time is short." "Maybe," said Muchiro. "But it's the same for Kamroji. Why don't you worry about her? Or Iguro?" Himejima's frown deepened. "Why would you bring up Iguro?" "It's just..." Muchiro stopped short. "He likes her, doesn't he?" For a fleeting instant, Himejima opened his lightless eyes wide. "I had no idea." "You didn't notice?" "No. I'm surprised that you did." It was a slightly rude remark, but Himejima said it without rancor. His stern, monk-like face softened. Muchiro had the sudden thought that if demons didn't exist, if they hadn't been forced to fight this war, Himejima would have lived a simple, quiet life somewhere far from turmoil. He was not a warrior at heart. "You've changed," said Himejima. "Or was this the real you all along?" Muchiro didn't know what to say. It was true that, in the past, he wouldn't have noticed a comrade's feelings, no matter how painfully obvious. He even forgotten his own twin. Once, he had cared only for killing demons. Now it seemed like he had been living in a thick fog, unable to see or hear. The voices of Tanjiro, who reminded him of his late father, and Kotetsu, who had risked everything to save him, had led him out of that fog and into the light in which he now stood. Thanks to them, the world had beauty and color again. He could notice the kindness of the people around him. Looking up at the broad sky over Ubuyashiki Mansion, Michiro suddenly remembered a promise he'd made in the village of swordsmiths. "Is that you, Lord Takedo? What are you doing here?" Kozo Kanamori ran up to Michiro and peered at his bandages. "Are you sure you're healed?" "More or less," Michiro said. "Well enough to pay a visit to the swordsmith village, anyway. How's the move coming along?" "Just 2 more days and we'll be finished. Women, children, and elders are moving to the new village first. My wife is already unpacking." Many villagers had been injured or killed in the attack by the upper rank 2 demon, but damage to the village as a whole had been kept to a minimum. The survivors had been able to begin evacuation to a new hidden site immediately. "We've moved nearly all our tools and swords," Kanamori continued from beneath his mask. "The last of them are being transported now. We'll bury our dead here." Heiga Nezuko ran ahead of everyone else and is already polishing blades in his new forge. "Never mind, though. He's not good for anything but swordsmithing, so if he stayed he'd only get in the way." Michiro looked out at the skeleton of the old village. Before the attack, the clanking of hammers on iron could be heard from every corner. Now the houses and smithies stood empty. It was an achingly lonely scene. "You're not moving the graves to the new village?" he asked. "No." Kanamori's voice caught, but he forced his tone to brighten. "We have to prioritize the living. And get back to making swords, of course. That's what we do." Michiro acknowledged this with a grunt. "But what brings you here, Lord Takedo? Did you forget something?" "I thought I'd visit Tetsudo's grave." Kanamori started in surprise, then nodded eagerly. "Is that so? In that case, I'd be delighted to show you the way." Tetsudo was the swordsmith who had made Michiro's swords. Before Kanamori took over, he'd been more than just Michiro's smith. From the beginning, he'd shown personal concern for the young demon slayer. Michiro hadn't been able to appreciate this while Tetsudo was still alive. In fact, he barely even remembered the man's name, which was exactly why he had to say a prayer at his grave before the village vanished. "I also wanted to talk to Kotetsu," he added. "But if the women and children had already moved to the new village, Kotetsu would have gone ahead with them." "Oh," Kanamori said. "If it's Kotetsu you're after, he's still around." "He is?" "Yes," said Kanamori. He paused. "The truth is, there's just the tiniest bit of trouble with young Kotetsu." Kanamori led Michiro to Tetsudo's grave. Michiro offered flowers and a prayer before setting out to find Kotetsu. "I know this place." Michiro looked around. He'd found himself in the grove where he first met Kotetsu. Beneath the ancient trees, Kotetsu sat abjectly in front of a clockwork automaton, the Urichi Type 0. From the tools scattered around, Michiro guessed that he was trying to repair it. Kotetsu let out a deep sigh. Then he spotted Michiro. "Takedo," he cried. "What's going on? Are you better already? But you were really hurt. You frothed at the mouth and passed out. I slept for 2 days straight." Whoa. You can't sleep off those kind of injuries. It's not like getting over a cold. For most people, anyway. "Takedo, are you even human?" Kotetsu was as excitable as ever. "Say," Michiro said casually, "why aren't you at the new village?" The boy deflated abruptly. His shoulders slumping, he muttered, "I can't go. The zero is still broken. Sorry. Because of me? No, of course not. Kotetsu shook his head frantically. I mean, when you knocked the arm off, I did wish your stupid seaweed head would explode. But? Muichiro looked down at the younger boy. It still had 5 arms left. But then, after I recalibrated it to take you down, Tanjiro used it for training. What? Muichiro was already lost. Kotetsu filled him in on the details. Tanjiro had used the zero as a sparring partner, starting with sticks rather than swords in the mechanical doll's remaining hands. At first the training was a disaster, but after a week Tanjiro's sword neared its mark. Still, Tanjiro hesitated to land a killing blow on the automaton. Friendly soul that he was, he didn't want to damage Kotetsu's beloved machine. Muichiro nodded to himself. That sounded like the Tanjiro he knew. So I told him, swing it's okay if it breaks, Kotetsu continued. I said I could fix it. Urged on, Tanjiro had brought his sword down on the Irichi Type 0 at last. And then the zero opened up and there was a katana inside, the young swordsmith said. Heiga Nezuko polished it up. What? This story was more surprising by the minute. With that blade, Tanjiro took the head of an upper rank for demon. Heartened by the success of the training, Kotetsu decided to get back to his own work in earnest. Tanjiro had trusted him, and his sword had been surer. However, I managed to screw the head and arms back in place, but that's just the exterior. Kotetsu shook his head wearily. The clockwork inside. The zero's not moving? Muichiro asked. No, it moves. More or less. But it doesn't function the way it used to, with all the attacks. No matter what I do, I can't recreate its battle training forms. I'm useless. Kotetsu hung his head again. Muichiro gently touched the automaton's arm and felt the solid chill of the wood against his palm. The way it had moved when he'd faced off against it in the past, he could almost have mistaken it for a human being with blood running through its veins. He could understand why Kotetsu was so dejected. Why don't you take it with you to the new village and work on it there? Kotetsu shook his head. Tekken told me if I can't get it back in shape by the last moving day, I ought to leave it behind. That's just 2 days from now. At the ends of his limp arms, his fists trembled. Muichiro tried to understand Tekken's thinking. The Nichiren swords were essential to the war against the demons, so the swordsmiths needed to focus on moving their village and returning to their work. If the automaton would compromise the speed and secrecy of the move, it would make sense to abandon it. We're using special techniques to keep the demons from following us, Kotetsu explained. There's a limit to how much we can bring. Meaning you can't take anything that doesn't work? Kotetsu sagged. Yes. The sound of sniffling came from behind his mask. Muichiro took his hand off the mechanical arm. The old Muichiro would have agreed wholeheartedly with the village chief. There was no point in saving useless things. Or useless people. But now he found Tekken's pronouncement heartless. Kotetsu's ancestors had built this clockwork automaton centuries ago, in the Warring States period. For Kotetsu, it was more than a machine. It was a memorial from his father, almost a member of the family. In that case, said Muichiro, you'll just have to fix it. Kotetsu choked back another sob. But I remember the movements. Not all of them, of course. Muichiro cut Kotetsu off. The younger boy looked up at him from beneath his mask. Let's fix the Irichi Type 0 together. What are you saying? Taquito? This isn't like you. Do you have a fever? Kotetsu's confusion bordered on impertinence, but Muichiro shrugged it off. I'll reproduce the movements. You remember them, he said. Or write them down. Huh? But we only have 2 days, so we better get to it. Kotetsu nodded, still uncertain. Right. The broken mechanical doll watched them with empty eyes. The right to move goes like this. Okay. Here, use right one and cut it like this. Like this? No. Like this. Faster, sharper. There was no way Kotetsu could commit all of Muchiro's detailed instructions to memory. His pencil raced earnestly across paper as Muchiro, stripped to his shirt sleeves, slowly demonstrated the basic forms used by the Orichi Type 0. He'd taken off his jacket to give Kotetsu a good view of his arm motions. In battle, he preferred a loose-fitting uniform that obscured his movements. At some point, red had begun to streak across the western sky, and fatigue was showing on Kotetsu's face. When Muchiro suggested a break, the young smith was clearly relieved. Good idea. I'll go get some water. Kotetsu dashed off to the nearest stream and soon returned with a full bamboo pail. Muchiro leaned back against the trunk of a maple tree and took a sip of the freshly drawn water. It was cold and faintly sweet. You're amazing, Taketo, Kotetsu said, sitting down beside him. Muchiro tilted his head skeptically. Where'd that come from? You only practice with the 0 once, but you remember all its forms. Who else could do that? Well, it's not like I remember every last one. Even so, it's really something. Compared to that, I'm Kotetsu. Looked away and sighed. It was quite the weighty sigh for a boy of 10. I mean, even with you helping me, I don't know how much I can do. You're only 10, said Muchiro. You've got a lot of growing up to do. It's not that. Kotetsu's voice rose, then fell again. I don't have a knack for making swords. And I'm not much of a mechanic either. I'm nothing. But you were blessed with talent from the day you were born. You could never understand how I feel. The small hands encircling the bamboo pail trembled. Muchiro turned his gaze from the boy sitting next to him up to the leafy trees. You know, when I was your age, I never even touched a sword. What? Kotetsu looked up, surprised. I figured you came from one of those famous demon-killing dynasties. Our dad was a woodcutter. Muchiro smiled at the nodding leaves. Our parents died when we were 10. After that, it was just me and my brother. I couldn't even cook rice or use a knife. I was hopeless at chopping wood. Yuichiro lost his temper at me all the time. He'd say the M in Muchiro stood for Mu because I was like a stupid cow. Or that the M was for Moot. Looking back, Muchiro saw that he'd been a sheltered boy, even spoiled. He resented Yuichiro's coldness, not understanding that his older twin was desperate to keep him safe. Yuichiro wasn't like me, he went on. He could do anything. Yuichiro was an adept cook. He could chop down trees. He could trap and dress game. And for all his cutting remarks and bouts of temper, he made Muchiro's favorite dish, daikon simmered in miso, whenever he could get his hands on the ingredients. Muchiro could still taste the comforting flavor of miso infusing the soft daikon. Was your brother also in the Demon Slayer Corps? Kotetsu asked. Was he a hashira? My brother died when we were 11, Muchiro said shortly. Killed by a demon. Oh. That's why I became a demon slayer. I'm so sorry, Taketo. Even through the mask, Muchiro could tell that Kotetsu's face had paled. He turned to the boy with curiosity. What are you apologizing for? It's just. I didn't mean to bring up painful memories, Kotetsu apologized. But it's thanks to you and Tanjiro that I'm able to remember my brother at all. Me and Tanjiro? What do you mean? Asterisk. Keeping the story as brief as he could, Muchiro explained that he nearly died fighting the demon that killed his brother. He'd lost his memory. But I remember now, he said. You tried to save me even after you were stabbed in the gut. You tried to help me. And to protect the village and its swords. Takito. Forget about me. Help, again Izuka. Protect the swords. There had been no ego in those words, only Kotetsu's selfless courage. He was no fighter, only a child of the village, yet he was prepared to give up his life for the swords. Seeing how much you care about people, and talking to Tanjiro, made me remember something important, Muchiro concluded. Takito. Thank you. He wanted to say that for a long time. I'm glad I had the chance to thank you in Tetsudo. No. I should be the one thanking you. Kotetsu stood up on the spot and bowed. Thank you, Takito. Why are you thanking me? Muchiro asked. Before Kotetsu could answer, they heard a chipper voice call out to them. Kotetsu. We finally found you. Mitsuri Kanroji came bounding over, a massive plate piled high with onigiri in her hands. Provisions, said Muchiro. Kotetsu was equally surprised. Kanroji? What are you doing here? And Muchiro too. I knew it. Mitsuri beamed at them as she set the plate down with a heavy thunk. Everybody at the village has been so good to us slayers, I thought I ought to come help you move. I'm really strong, you know. I can carry a ton of stuff. But when I got here the move was basically over, and I was wondering what I could do, and then I ran into Kanamori. Kanamori popped his head out from behind a tree and waved. Oh, Muchiro said, comprehension dawning. So that's how you knew where I was. Kanamori's mask bobbed up and down. I may have mentioned that young Kotetsu was having trouble with his family's automaton and that Lord Takito was likely with him. And when she said she wanted to bring you a snack, I decided to assist. He held up a large kettle in one hand and a stack of teacups in the other. The finest Yukuro green tea. There wasn't much rice left in the village, so I could only make a little bit of onigiri, said Mitsuri. But I salted them nicely and filled them with yummy umebashi. That's a little bit? Kotetsu faltered before the mountain of onigiri. It is for her, Muchiro muttered. Mitsuri giggled, her cheeks flushing. You two are real buddies now, huh? So cute. Oh no, Kotetsu protested. The Hashira Takito and I are, yeah. We're friends, Muchiro said. Kotetsu looked at Muchiro in surprise. Takito? I was wrong, he told the swordsmith. About what I said that time. Your time and Hashira's time have a completely different value. Swordsmiths can't fight. They can't save someone's life. They only have the ability to make weapons. Know your place in life and act accordingly. Because you aren't a baby. He had been ridiculously, shamefully arrogant. At the time, he hadn't even understood why Kotetsu got upset or why Tanjiro slapped his hand away. Tanjiro had told him he lacked consideration, and he'd been exactly right. The swordsmiths are important and do crucial work. They're different from swordsmen but still have incredible skills. I mean, we couldn't do anything if we didn't have actual swords. Swordsmen and swordsmiths need each other. We're both part of the fight. Even in the face of Tanjiro's rebuke, Muchiro had felt the whole incident was trivial. He hadn't taken a single word to heart. Back then, no emotion could reach him. He lived only to kill demons. He'd been no better than a mechanical doll. I know I should have done it sooner, he said, but I want to apologize. To you. To all of you. I'm sorry. He bowed deeply. Kotetsu's head fell and his shoulders shook. The swords you and Kanamori make have saved me, and Heiga and Izuka's swords have saved Tanjiro, Muchiro continued. Swordsmen and swordsmiths are fighting together. Tanjiro was exactly right. The boy's Hayatoko mask had slipped, and droplets fell from its wooden chin. Kotetsu was silently crying. You've really grown up, Master Takito, Kanamori said thoughtfully. Then he let out a sniffle. He didn't hesitate to remove his own mask and bare his thin, teary-eyed face. How overjoyed Tetsudo would be if he could see you now. But it's true. Mitsuri had joined in with tears of her own, her face screwed up in a sob. She clutched her sword as if ready to kiss it. Master Tekken's katana has saved me so many times. Kanamori? Kamroji? Muchiro was taken aback by this outpouring of emotion. Why are you crying? Takedo, Kotetsu said, wiping the cheeks showing from beneath his mask. Will you help me some more after we finish this onigiri? Of course, said Muchiro. We'll do it together. Kotetsu grinned through his tears. You can do it, sobbed Mitsuri. I'll make you loads of snacks, so get in there and get to work. She burst into another wail as she hugged Kotetsu and Muchiro tight. Okay, here we go, Kotetsu said solemnly. He inserted the key into the back of the mechanical doll's head. The automaton readied its swords and stepped forward. The 6 katanas shot out blindingly fast, one after the other. Muchiro deflected each one in turn. By the time the doll stopped, it was clear that it had regained the sure, flowing movements Muchiro remembered from the Yorichi Type 0. It was the final evening. At the last minute, Kotetsu had finally repaired the automaton to his satisfaction. Mitsuri let out a sigh of relief. Kotetsu turned to the assembled group and bowed. That's all it can do for now. I've only managed to recreate one form. Mitsuri applauded wildly. It's amazing, Kotetsu. Kanamori joined the applause. And imagine, just a few days ago you were stumped. You've worked hard to get it functioning again. He nodded with satisfaction. It's just as the chief said. The chief? Kotetsu frowned. Master Tekken? Yes, young Kotetsu, Kanamori said. All that talk about abandoning the machine if you couldn't repair it was a lie. What? Kotetsu was stunned. A lie? Mitsuri leapt to her feet. Are you kidding? Why, said Kotetsu. Why would he be so cruel? What's the meaning of this, Kanamori? Muchiro's voice was hard. Oh, well. Kanamori scratched the back of his head apologetically. You see, Kotetsu's a good kid. Smart, dedicated, level-headed when it comes to making decisions, and he's got a keen eye for analysis. But the chief thinks you need to push yourself more, Kanamori explained. The boy sets limits on himself, and that's no good. He doesn't know his own potential. So to give Kotetsu a push, he set up a fake deadline? Muchiro asked. More or less. Kanamori's mask bobbed. The chief felt if he put Kotetsu's feet to the flames, so to speak, he'd surprise himself. I was sent to keep an eye on his progress. It took Kotetsu a moment to digest this. The village chief was personally concerned about his growth. That's what was going on in his head. I had no idea. To be honest, I thought you'd give up. Kanamori confessed. I'm sorry. I underestimated you. You've done magnificently here. No, you were right. I was whining about how hopeless things were when I barely started work. If Takedo hadn't shown up to help me, I would have given up. He turned to Muchiro. I'm going to repair the Zero all the way. When I do, please come train with it again. He bowed deeply, then added, I'll fine-tune it and add some forms to hit your weak points. Muchiro remembered something Kotetsu had said when he talked about tanjiro training with the automaton. Is that what you did before? You tuned it to defeat me? Arg. I'm sorry. Kotetsu shrank back. I was so mad at you back then. I'm sorry for calling you a seaweed head, an emotionless jerk, an ugly shrimp, and everything else. I don't feel that way now. Muchiro stared. Those were all about me? I'm sorry. It's fine. It doesn't matter now. Kotetsu took Michiro's hands. You promise? You'll definitely come back? I will. Kotetsu's hands were hard, crisscrossed with old scars and new blisters. They were the hands of someone who fought to the limit every day. Michiro's hands were the same. Send me a message when you've got all the forms working, Michiro said. Okay. We can invite Tanjiro and Nezuko and Genya and everybody, said Mitsuri. And Kanamori and Master Tekken. I'll bring the snacks. This was an extremely Mitsuri sort of idea. Her endless cheer, even in the midst of battle, gave strength to those around her. And the rest of Tanjiro's friends too, she added. I'm sure they'd love it. Imagining this get-together, Michiro found himself smiling. The others looked shocked by his expression. He didn't know when they would meet again. He'd made a fragile promise, with no guarantee, in the midst of a war against powerful demons. But it sparked a small, gentle light in his heart. It's a promise, Taketo, Kotetsu said. He continued waving until Michiro and Mitsuri passed far out of view. Taketo, Himejima asked. Michiro said nothing. He gazed at the sky. Are you all right? Returning from his memory of the swordsmith village, Michiro looked over at Himejima. I'm all right, he replied. It was a response not only to what he had just been asked, but to the stone hashira's earlier question. Himejima's colorless eyes stared at him intently. Really? I'm not empty anymore. He had friends to fight alongside him. He had a master worth risking his life to protect. His brother hadn't shunned him, he'd loved him until the moment of his death. He told him that the M in Michiro was for Mugen Infinity. No. That wasn't quite right. Now he understood that he'd never really been empty. He just hadn't been able to see how full his life was. Let's fight together as Hashira. The warmth of the flame Hashira's hand hitting his shoulder. Who will understand you? When I see the sword you used, I shed tears. The kindness of the old swordsmith who worried about his well-being. Michiro wished he'd noticed these things sooner. Thank you, Himejima, he said, with real feeling. In his heart, he bowed to Rengoku and Tetsudo, and to all the other people who had given him their love. Perhaps he sensed the emotion in Michiro's voice, because Himejima abruptly smiled. Forget it. I don't think I need to worry after. All right. Michiro stood up. See you at the next Hashira meeting. Be in good health. Michiro bowed his head and left the gazebo, narrowing his eyes at the wind that swirled around him. He looked up to the heavens. Clouds streamed by. The glimpses of sky between them were so blue they almost hurt his eyes. Look at that, Yuichiro. Michiro said a silent prayer to his brother, who had left the world so young. Behind Yuichiro's sharp tongue and cold gaze, there had been love and the resolve to keep Michiro safe. His brother had lived his short life fully. Michiro didn't know what the next day would bring. He might lose his life hunting demons. Even if he was fortunate enough to evade their fangs, he'd be gone by 25. Somehow, though, he wasn't afraid. As long as he lived in a way that would make his friends and family proud, when he got to the other side Yuichiro would greet him with a smile. You did good, Michiro, he'd say. Across Michiro's face flashed a smile as boundless as the blue sky. End of Chapter 4. Thank you for listening. Remember to like and subscribe for lots more.